Thank you very much for the chance to be here today. So, basically, for many years, the U.S. Army has been incorporating network-enabled capabilities to take advantage of the true secret of the U.S. military, which is the initiative of our junior officers and our non-commissioned officers. What they've been doing is using these network-centric operations to enhance the capabilities of Army networks and information sharing capabilities. At the heart of these are concepts like power to the edge, and this is reinforced in this particular conflicts we're in by the decision authority that's being delegated to the people on the ground in the field at pretty junior levels. And frankly, this seems fully consistent with what we've been listening to in terms of innovation at the edge being addressed here at the summit. And the Army has been leading very far forward on this for a long time with things like CombatCommand.com, things like America's Army Game, the extent to which virtual reality has been incorporated into training. So I think there'll be an awful lot we can learn here from Lieutenant General Jeff Sorenson, who's the Army Chief Information Officer and also the G6 on the Army staff, and Major General Nick Justice, who's the Program Executive for Tactical Command Control and Communications up in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. So without further ado, let me ask some of the questions. General Sorenson typically is addressing these from a policy perspective, General Justice more from the tactical implementation perspective, and let me ask them to answer each in their own areas. So first of all, why would you want to enable innovation at the edge?
Why would we want to basically motivate or enhance or have innovation at the edge? I guess from my perspective, if you look at warfare today, warfare has dramatically changed from when your father, or your grandfather, or great-grandfather were in combat. It's no longer the good guys are up here, the bad guys are here, and you kind of fight this way. We have and we function in environments that are called asymmetrical, where the enemy doesn't wear a uniform, where the enemy is sometimes in front of you, sometimes behind you, sometimes to the side of you. And so typically in the past, we would sort of separate who did what. You know, the senior commander would be strategic, the corps commander who commands many divisions would maybe be operational, and then you had the brigade commander would be tactical. But that particular separation is no longer there anymore. And so you now have what are tactical forces basically functioning and doing, if you will, strategic operations. So they have to have the best situational awareness at that front edge. And the only way to get at that is to continue to do innovation, provide capability, make sure data is accessible, visible, verifiable, and available to them to make those decisions, because in many cases at the tactical level, at the far distant edge, they're conducting operations that have strategic implications. And so if you haven't given them the information to make those proper decisions, the strategic consequences could be dire. So that's, from my perspective, I think that's why we need to continue to push this type of capability down as low as we can.
Well, sir, that's the big Pentagon policy voice speaking.
That's true.
I'm just a program manager type, and so I will tell you it's all about money. If I can get my soldiers, my NCOs, my warrants out in the field to create new applications, solve problems for me, then I'm not having to go in and fight the budget battle, the Pentagon battle in crossing the river of the Potomac into D.C. to get more money, and I can deliver more capability to the warfighter.
Right.
Great. Well, how would you summarize then some of the Army's present innovation at the edge activities? Where do you expect to go next with it?
Well, I think in some cases we have, you go back and look at some of the systems we now have and deployed, such as command posts of the future, such as Tiger, such as, in many cases, the biometrics. These have all become, if you will, non-program of record that didn't necessarily go through all the particular wickets, but have been delivered very quickly out to the field. And I think we need to continue to enable that, because in many cases, my experience, much like Nick, I mean, I was kind of where Nick was at some point in my lifetime. What we find and what I find, I think he would also concur with, is when you take that soldier who has the intuition or the experience or an understanding of what combat operations are and the engineer, and you mix them together, you get some magic. And so what happens in many cases is that we have taken these systems that we have developed and we've given it to the soldiers, and now they are using them in ways that were never planned for, nor did we think about as people were writing requirements for. And so once we give it to the soldier, They make the improvements as required based upon what their conditions are and what their needs are, and we continue to evolve and improve capabilities over time.
Got it.
And I would tell you, I think that from a real practical experience, getting out there, the investment we have in our infrastructure, if we can find those touch points of modernization and touch points where we can extend that infrastructure, then we're able to stay up with the pace of technology change in the commercial world. If I don't, it takes so much money and so much time to replace large infrastructure in the military that we fall behind.
What might be some of the limits of the ability to which you would be able to extend this decentralized innovation?
Well, we're right now looking at, and sir, you mentioned CPOF as one. We're looking at creating
the future.
Architectures that allow us to find those touch points. And so we're developing those identifiable places with the interface controls that you need to say, if you'll work something in this framework, then we can deploy it. We're able to now then leverage and deploy our science and technology investments directly into the infrastructures that we're doing. Now, what are we doing? We've got DARPA working on a application called Tiger that extends the network down to a dismounted soldier. New radios that will hook into our big infrastructure like WinT. So if I would take a FEM-to-Cell module and put it in a touch point of modernization in WinT, I could then network cell phones on a battlefield. Well, think of the power of that. I mean, I walk around with an Android cell phone in my pocket. Every day there's a new application for me to use. Wouldn't that be a great power to give soldiers on a battlefield? To take pictures, network photographs, network communications, network information and data.
And in doing that, that is the operational capability that we can take from these tools. But you asked the question, what would prevent you or what would hinder you? The issue we continue to be confounded with is then the security issue. I mean, it is the application from the standpoint of taking the pictures or providing this capability or putting the information out the edge. But in some case, there also has to be a means to ensure that that information that gets put out is secure. Now, you get to the far distant edge, one would say, that information there is perishable. So it needs to be secure for maybe an hour. After that, it becomes, something for the history books. But at the same point in time, you have to ensure that the soldiers who are using this capability at the far distant edge, they have a trust in their network that the data they're getting and the information they're getting, they know is verifiable. And nobody has sort of hacked in and said, well, don't go bomb this target, go bomb that target, because they've hacked in and given them different coordinates. So the security aspect, all gets down to a notion that the soldiers, when they have that capability at the far distant edge, do I have trust in my network, and do I have trust in the data that I just got to act on it to engage the enemy? And so it's that security piece that we continue to have to work at to take these commercial off-the-shelf capabilities and make them applicable to the military and in our formations.
So following up on that a little bit, there's been a lot of talk here about the use of social software in the Department of Defense, and particularly there are, I think, considerably differing ideas about how this might be used among different services, different commands. What's the Army's view on the use of social software?
Well, the social networking sites provide enormous capability. I'll give you a point of case. We have a commander now responsible for, if you will, the entire continent of Africa. Now, I will tell you, as well as most of you know, the continent of Africa is not networked like you will find maybe in Europe or certainly the Pacific or in some cases what is now taking place in Iraq. So he has to rely upon a very I don't know what I would call it, a austere, if you will, network. And so in many cases, his involvement and his interaction with his peers and his people that he has to deal with there in Africa, they don't have the comms link. They don't have the type of capability that we have. And consequently, these things like, and these systems like social networking sites, Twitter or whatever, are ways to get messages out from an operational standpoint. And at the same point in time, I would say just from the Army itself, we're finding the use of Twitter and Facebook to be enormous capabilities for how we recruit. because soldiers, as we're looking at today, in terms of this generation, they don't get the recruiting signs and they don't understand, the mail. But you get them a Twitter account or you talk to them on Facebook. Now they see that the Army is relevant and they can communicate. Clearly, from the standpoint of the Army, we have used this at, I would say, a great extent with respect to our public affairs, with respect to a session command, and so forth. But it continues to be an issue that, again, just as we were talking about with security, how do we make sure that we're not compromising something with respect to operational security? So I think where the Army is right now, we're working together with the OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, to put together a policy for DOD that will establish how these particular social networking sites will be used. And the concern is, yes, we need to use them from an operational capability, but at the same point in time, we need to make sure that we monitor these networks to create this, not to create any sort of security issues. So it's I would call this management of polarities, operational capability versus security, and how do you balance that? So,
sir, I would just say, since 94, 95, we've stood up things like chat rooms in AKO and have been really at the leading edge of government enabling those kind of social media to take place. What we would like to do is now move that out so that we can self-form and self-create the communities of interest that we want to deal with. What we find is you get to somewhere about 150 folks in a network and you get optimal utility. You get larger than that, it just becomes a news service, and you're not getting the interaction and the collaboration. Collaboration is one of the most important things on a battlefield for you to do, to synchronize your activities. The same thing you would use it for in everyday life. You're synchronizing various activities to bring to bear a capability and to be able to self-create that. Now, we've always used rigid infrastructure. So we use our hierarchies in the organization to do things. And what we're finding is we're having to change just the basic way we do business to start to collaborate and be able to create those collaborative environments that create that effectiveness we're looking for.
I find the number 150 as an optimal collaborative space to be very interesting, because yesterday we had some discussions about tens of thousands or millions potentially of people online together listening to government talking about ideas, and one of the concerns was how would you actually get people to interact in that world. So you actually you feel about 150 is the right number for the Army.
We're looking at about 150 to work together to bring to bear to solve very specific problems. Now, you want to talk about policy, maybe you can have a larger format in that. But if you want to focus people and bring them to bear on solving a problem that's well described, well defined, get more than about 150. I mean, we've learned that over years and years of history. Companies are about in the range of 150 people, because that is the power of collaboration, the power to bring people together to get something done.
I want to come back to security for just a minute, because we have the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative last year. We have the President's 60-day review. Every year I go out to the hacker convention, DEF CON in Las Vegas, and the last couple of years they've really focused on the, in their term, opportunities provided by social software sites. So much as I appreciate, and I'm fully in sync with you on the value of it, I'm just wondering what particular limits does the Army put on the use of social software by the soldiers, or I know there's a big policy review going on right now in DOD. What do you see as some of the potential sort of boundaries?
Well, again, I think you get down to, as we were just talking about, there are some operational capabilities. So I think in first case, we are trying to define specifically what communities would make use of this, and defining, in some cases here we got the public affairs, we got the sessions, we have some of our operational commands, defining the need for why they need this particular capability. And then after that, it is, in many cases, it's just an intense monitoring of that network to essentially watch what's taking place, to avert, if you will, any sort of malicious capability or malicious software or malicious activity taking place there. And I think in some cases that's where we're going to be for a while, until such time, I think, maybe over the next year or so, where we develop more of our technical capabilities to essentially allow people to be able to function in those environments and do such with a little bit more latitude. But right now, I think we are where we are, and so from my standpoint, I think we identify who is going to use it, what the purpose is, and then we sort of monitor the heck out of what they're doing.
Sir, I would add to that the fact that one of our challenges is we're always working in an austere environment. And so what strikes me is a real area to exploit right now is the way the smartphone systems are starting to change the way we do collaboration in social environments. Because now it's no longer tethered to a hard wire. And it much more replicates a military situation out on a battlefield where we've been very dependent on wireless communications, wireless networking for a long, long time. You know, the commercial world is starting to explode almost geometrically in the number of wireless devices out there that are far more than just voice communications. You know, it's the photography, passing photographs, it's data that you do, it's the chat that goes on in those environments. Studying those will allow us to understand the limitations that we'll have to place on those environments, because if I run out of bandwidth, there's priorities of what I've got to get. The importance of certain information certainly overrides the need for a free reign on a network.
So we have about 3.5 minutes left, and I want to give you a chance to talk about maybe some new initiatives you're about to roll out. But let me quickly ask about acquisition. Do you see any way to accelerate the acquisition of IT-related capabilities?
Well, I think if you look at a short comment on that would be, if you look at the acquisition of these capabilities today, we are clearly going out to the commercial sector, as Nick was mentioning here, and beginning to leverage what is commercially available. I would tell you, having just recently come back from Afghanistan, you go in to see the G6 at that point of the Task Force 101. And he puts in, kind of an update of where his battle command system, software, hardware, and so forth. 60% of what he's functioning with today are non-program of record, basically things that he can go off and buy and use, and they're now employing. While that's the good news, the bad news is in many cases that because it's a non-program of record, when the system breaks down, it's the illities, it's the logistics, reliability, sustainability. You know, he doesn't call 1-800 Nick Justice because Nick Justice says, I don't have this in my, potpourri of systems that I'm monitoring or managing. And so we have that dilemma we got to work with. But clearly, speeding through in terms of acquisition, we have to continue to look at how do we buy IT, unlike what we do with airplanes and tanks and things like that. We have to look at it from a standpoint of leveraging the commercial sector, putting out incremental capabilities over time and continuing to evolve those. And I think that's the whole dilemma we wrestle with right now.
So I know General Justice would love to get into this, but in the time remaining.
Okay, in the time remaining.
So in terms of, I just want about the new applications.
Right. So in some cases, what we're trying to do into getting at that is what we're going to launch here before the end of September. I'd hope to be able to announce it here at the summit, but it's like everything else in the government. Things don't happen exactly as quickly and as efficiently as you would expect. But it's going to be known as Apps for the Army. And we've been working with Tim O'Reilly and his team trying to leverage what occurred here in D.C. with Apps for Democracy. As I have gone out and visited troops in the field, and I think you're going to hear a little example of that here, we have a lot of innovation taking place with our soldiers. But they're doing it in pockets of expertise and in many cases silos. And they're doing it in their area and not making it visible to everyone. And so what we're going to try to do is do something like they did for Apps for Democracy, but called Apps for the Army, where we have now identified a platform, forge.mil, which essentially is hosted by DISA, the Defense Information System Agency, and then making sure that we can provide the data that they need in order to make that application so that it doesn't get built in just Iraq or it doesn't get built somewhere in the Pacific, but it gets built and then we populate it onto this, if you will, application layer, forge.mil, so that everybody can take advantage of it and everybody can improve it, and that way begin to speed through the improvement of our battle command capabilities over time. So hopefully more to follow. I've been told that we will be able to have this contract signed, sealed, and delivered by the end of September. So we look forward to everybody participating and helping us improve what the soldiers do. But also, like I said, we'll have an opportunity for our soldiers now to actually go off and make a true improvement in terms of what they do every day.
General Sorenson, General Justice, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Sir, I do hear people out there.
Yes, there are people out there.
You can't see them except for those little Apple logos out in the audience every once in a while.
It is absolutely blinding. So let me spend a few minutes here to talk about an opportunity called Star Tides. If I can push the button and get the slide up. Pardon me? On the side, I'm sorry. Okay. So we'll go back. Okay, so TIDES is about sustainable support to stressed populations, post-war, post-disaster, impoverished. And what this is a global network of people from Australia to Singapore to Latin America to Northern Europe who are trying to address these sorts of problems. It's public-private, it's whole of government, it's transnational. You can see in the logos there's NGOs from Red Cross and Instead, there are universities, there are government agencies. We try to be as inclusive as possible. The point here is knowledge sharing. This is not a field operating activity. We don't hand out MREs or do acquisitions, but we're about supporting decision makers and those people working in the field. That's a picture of the UN liaison cell in Jakarta during tsunami. TIDES actually stands for Transportable Infrastructures for Development Emergency Support, and some of the things we're looking at for situational awareness, for the integrated cooking, we've been able to reduce fuel use by 75 to 90% over open pit fires. A lot of renewable energy, the integrated solar and wind. It's really been a fun project from that perspective. We're looking at post-war, post-disaster, impoverished. The right-hand picture, the top picture is Basra in 2003 after the invasion. Lower left is tsunami. Right is the Turkana people of northern Kenya. Are these refugees? Are they nomads? But we're looking at short-term and long-term, so both refugees and post-disasters. We are both domestic and foreign, and also military involved or not. And because of that, no one aspect of the bureaucracy covers all the different areas we're trying to look at. This picture here is in Jalalabad in the upper right with a TIDES t-shirt during election monitoring Afghanistan. The lower left is an inflatable satellite dish during firefighting. The whole point we're about is to meet the needs of local populations with solutions that are useful to and sustainable by them in their worlds. I'm not interested in something that looks good in a DoD depot or an AID warehouse. We do this by integrated planning with a website and radical inclusion. This picture is against the wall of an innovative shelter called a Hexayurt. Costs $400 retail. On the upper left is the logo of Eric Rasmussen's Strong Angels. Down the lower right is Dave Warner's Synergy Strike Force. This is Burners Without Borders from Burning Man, and the hat is Highlands Forum from Dick O'Neill, which continues to be the most highest return investment of anything I've ever done in government. Some of the insights we've gotten out of this are the capabilities alone aren't enough. You also need to build trust and develop social networks. These are Afghan women soldering on circuit cards in Jalalabad. The question is, do you drink 3 cups of tea, smoke a peace pipe, or slug down a stein of beer in order to develop the social trust? Great policy and doctrine out here in this world, but if you don't convert it into effective field operating procedures, it's not going to work. Legal and regulatory constraints. In tsunami, we had on the order of $10 million American citizens were willing to donate to, not tsunami, the cyclone in Myanmar, to bring comms equipment to Myanmar. We could not get that out of customs, out of export controls. Wound up being provided by Japanese and Nepalese. The average stay in a refugee camp these days is over 7 years. That's completely different than the first 60 days after the earthquake. So how do you mix and match between government stockpiles and contract, non-government, empowered civilians, or commercial supply chain to save everybody money? The final point is if you don't train people, the gear is going to be resting in the jungle 6 months later. If you don't exercise, the groups can't work together. And if you don't educate, you're going to be making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So some of the things we're doing now, we're working on distributed renewable energy and essential services in Afghanistan. If you actually had micro hydro, wind, solar, and renewable power, used it to enable communications, what kind of essential services could the Afghan people choose for themselves? And Ralph Wellborn, who's out here in the office, has been doing terrific work with us on this project. We're looking at the same kind of thing in Latin America, leveraging military-to-military capabilities to leave behind enhanced partner capacity for the host nation. And we're doing field experiments on the Camp Roberts. John Crowley is also in the audience, has been honchoing this for us. And in August, we did some geospatial information systems tied to rapid updates via chat and SMS texting. That within 2 weeks of the time there were first code written in California, was on the ground in Jalalabad for election monitoring. Upcoming events at Fort McNair. This first week of October, 6 to 9, we'll be having a field demo. Last year we put $5,000 of government money into it. We got $1.8 million of private sector investment. That's the kind of leveraging innovation at the edge we try to do in this project. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. We'd love to have you come join us. Please sign in or just take a look at the website and see if you're interested. There are our points of contact. Really appreciate the chance to talk to you about this today. I'll be joined now by Carlos Castillo, who will follow up with General Justice's point about some of the things that our soldiers have been doing in the field with regard to warfighter technologies. Carlos? There's your clicker.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon. As members of the California Army National Guard, Sergeant Paul Lynn and myself were deployed with the 1st of 160th Infantry in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom 7. We were assigned jobs in the Tactical Operations Center. The mission was actually pretty straightforward. We had to escort logistical convoys from staging areas in Kuwait through numerous locations throughout Iraq. There was a lot of moving pieces involved with operationally tracking these missions. Coming from IT and development backgrounds, we saw problems with the way things were currently being done. At the platoon level, leaders were tasked with creating manifests that contained soldier and equipment information on whatever platforms they had available, be it Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, some in Access. At the battalion level, we had to duplicate the efforts to ensure that the data was free of errors, and then we had to track the missions using mostly whiteboards, easels, even a little laminated map board where soldiers had little Humvee printouts and tape, and they'd move them along. So how do we fix this? We said, well, let's create a cohesive, consolidated set of web applications that we can put on a LAMP platform. Once we got that on the network, leaders of all echelons had access to the information for a common operating picture they could all share. Using mostly API-driven components and taking into consideration the reliability of the network overseas, we decided to replicate the database over numerous locations. This also allowed the end users to connect to the closest node. What we ended up with was the Combat Operations Interactive Network, or COIN, which now allowed soldiers to intuitively click through tasks that they had to do to track different missions. We had a mission tracking screen, which is much like an airport screen, data mashing tools that pulled together information from different sources, chatting via the web and an existing IRC network, as well as geoplotting of medevac and route status applications. Our populations grew in popularity within a matter of weeks. We found that having that web platform available for us to develop on allowed us to quickly code and develop for the warfighter, for continue to develop missions to change them to their specific mission. Now, it wasn't easy. It took us about 6 months to get on the network. But once on the network, we were able to code for whom we thought is most important of all, and that was the warfighter. Excuse me. That's my time. I'll be followed by Gunnar Hellickson from Red Hat. Thank you.
Hey there, good afternoon. You're probably expecting Martin Statler, who also works for Red Hat. Unfortunately, wasn't able to join us, but you're going to have to deal with the less good-looking guy, who is me. All right, so I'm going to tell a story about some work that Martin did when he was deployed in Iraq. He spent about 14 months there, and he had a unique experience as an open source developer and engineer who was also deployed, and he was actually deployed in the battlefield. So here's Martin's premise. Only pack it if you can hack it. There is a great culture of improvisation in the Army when you're deployed. That culture of improvisation also applies to the software that ends up being deployed. So we need to provide the warfighter tools to be able to do this. The poncho is a great metaphor for this. Anyone who has been given a poncho by the armed services knows that the poncho is good for everything except keeping the rain off you. You can use it as a raft. You can use it as a lean-to. You can use it to carry cargo. Anything except protecting yourself. Again, this culture of improvisation. So as he's improvising, he's learned a couple lessons, one of which is you don't want to replace something that they've already given you. What you want to do is improvise, not for the sake of improvising, but in order to create a force multiplier, right? You want to improvise with hardware and software because it's a field expedient. When you're improvising, an important thing to remember is to document it. Often, especially when you're dealing with software in the battlefield scenario, you need to document everything that you're doing. And you need to worry about the security certifications. Keep all that paperwork with you. Here's an example. Here you see a photo of Martin and one of his men in an improvised tower, which is created with a concrete water pipe turned up on end. Up here, their tactical radios didn't reach the center of the fob, so they had to actually improvise voice over IP network using this Wi-Fi mesh network hidden in an ammo can. All this material was begged, borrowed, stolen, pulled out of the trash, and he was able to improvise the power, the wireless data network. He installed an Asterisk server in the headquarters in order to facilitate this kind of communication. Another improvisation that he did with open source software was these remote FLIR cameras. These are infrared cameras. Some poor guy had to stand there staring at this infrared camera all day looking for insurgents planting bombs on the outside of the base. He actually installed software developed by a German engineer to look for, to keep track of his cat at his house. He installed that software on the base, and that's how they did their monitoring. All of this was done under the aegis of his commander. This wasn't a wildcat operation. This was a sanctioned event, and that's a really important point to make. Another really important point, an experience that he had was he was only able to do this because he knew how to do it. It's really important to start teaching our soldiers how to improvise with software in the same way that we teach them how to improvise with hardware. Likewise, once he had solved these problems, he had no easy way to take these improvements that he had made and feed them back up into Big Army. The announcement that General Sorenson just mentioned with apps for Army, I think, is a huge step in the right direction. Thank you very much.